Some men don't talk much, not because they lack words, but because words stopped being enough a long time ago. They learned early that explaining pain doesn't always bring relief, and that silence can sometimes feel safer than misunderstanding. These are the men who have been through too much, not in the dramatic sense that stories are told, but in the quiet accumulation of loss, disappointment, responsibility, and endurance that slowly reshapes the way a man exists in the world. They don't announce what they've survived. You won't hear it in their tone or see it on their faces right away, but you can sense it in how they move through life carefully, deliberately, always aware that things can change without warning. Pain didn't make them loud. It made them observant. It taught them that nothing is guaranteed, and that stability, when it appears, must be protected. These men often learned self-reliance too early, not because they wanted independence, but because there was no one else to lean on when it mattered most. When support failed to arrive, they became their own. When comfort was absent, they learned to function without it. Over time, this turns into a quiet rule: don't expect rescue. And once that rule sets in, it changes everything from relationships to ambition, from hope to trust. What most people don't realize is that suffering doesn't always break a man outwardly. Sometimes it sharpens him inwardly. It gives him an emotional awareness others never develop. He notices tension before it escalates. He senses when something is about to fall apart. He reads silence better than words, not because he's paranoid, but because experience taught him to pay attention. There is a cost to this awareness. These men often struggle to relax fully. Even in calm moments, part of them remains alert. Peace feels unfamiliar. Stillness can feel suspicious. When life becomes quiet, the mind sometimes fills the space with memories it never processed out loud. And this is why some men keep busy, not for ambition, not for success, but because slowing down forces them to sit with what they've been carrying for years. They are often misunderstood. People mistake their restraint for emotional distance, their boundaries for coldness, their silence for disinterest. What others see as detachment is often self-control. What looks like indifference is frequently emotional regulation, learned the hard way. These men know what chaos feels like, and they refuse to invite it back into their lives. Suffering changes how a man relates to people. Trust is no longer automatic. It becomes selective, cautious, earned. Not because he believes everyone will hurt him, but because he understands the impact when someone does. He knows how deeply betrayal cuts when you've already been wounded before. So he guards his inner world, not out of fear, but out of respect for what it took to survive. These men are often dependable in crisis. When things fall apart, they don't panic. They've already lived through worse. While others freeze, they act. While others collapse, they hold the weight. But when the crisis ends, there is rarely anyone checking on them. Strength, especially quiet strength, often goes unnoticed until it's gone. There's a loneliness specific to men who have suffered deeply. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being unseen, of carrying experiences that don't fit into casual conversation, of realizing that most people don't really want the truth when they ask how you're doing. They want reassurance, not reality. Over time, these men stop sharing, not because they have nothing to say, but because they've learned that vulnerability is often mishandled. So they become selective with their honesty. They open up only where there is depth, patience, and emotional maturity. And if they don't find that, they stay silent. Pain doesn't always make a man bitter. Sometimes it makes him deeply compassionate. He recognizes struggle in others quickly. He doesn't dismiss pain just because it's invisible. He listens without interrupting. He understands that strength and suffering often coexist in the same person, but compassion has its limits. These men eventually learn that empathy without boundaries leads to exhaustion. Many of them have given too much to people who didn't value it. Many have been the strong one for too long. And eventually, they learn to conserve themselves not out of selfishness, but out of survival. Men who have been through too much don't chase validation the way others do. Approval feels unreliable to them. praise feels temporary. They've learned that external affirmation disappears the moment circumstances change. So instead, they build something internal: quiet self-respect, grounded identity, and a sense of worth that doesn't need to be confirmed by others. They don't measure life by excitement. They measure it by stability, consistency, and peace. Loud happiness feels shallow to them. They prefer calm fulfillment. They don't need constant stimulation to feel alive. In fact, too much noise feels draining. Their nervous systems have learned to value predictability after living through uncertainty. These men often struggle with rest, not because they don't want it, but because rest requires letting go of control. And control is what kept them safe when things were falling apart. Learning to rest is often one of their hardest lessons. Stillness can feel vulnerable. Peace can feel undeserved. But slowly, with time, they learn that survival doesn't have to be permanent. They don't talk about the past much, but it lives in their decisions, in the way they choose people carefully, in the way they don't tolerate disrespect, in the way they leave situations the moment they feel instability returning. They're not afraid to walk away, not because they don't care, but because they know the cost of staying where harm exists. These men don't romanticize pain. They don't believe suffering makes someone superior. They simply know it leaves marks, some visible, most invisible. And those marks shape priorities. They stop chasing things that don't matter. They stop proving themselves to people who don't listen. They stop explaining their boundaries. There is a quiet dignity in men who have survived deeply. They don't boast about resilience. They don't seek recognition. They don't need applause. They carry themselves with a steadiness that comes from knowing they've already endured what they once thought would break them. But strength does not erase the need for connection. These men still want to be understood. They still want closeness. They just need it to be real. They don't have energy for shallow bonds. They want depth, loyalty, and emotional safety. And if they don't find it, they would rather be alone than surrounded by people who don't truly see them. To the man watching this who has been through too much, this is not a message telling you to be stronger, to push harder, or to turn pain into purpose. This is permission. Permission to rest. Permission to stop explaining. Permission to acknowledge that what you survived mattered, even if no one else saw it. You are not broken because you are guarded. You are not weak because you are tired. You are not behind because your path looks different. You adapted, you endured, you learned. And that matters. Some men carry their past like a scar. Not something to hide, not something to show off, but something that reminds them of what they've survived. If you are one of those men, understand this. Your quiet presence, your steadiness, your restraint, these are not flaws. They are evidence. You don't owe the world optimism. You don't owe anyone access to your inner life. You don't owe explanations for your boundaries. You owe yourself peace. And if all you've done is survive up to this point, that is already more than enough.